Welcome to State of Mind. This is Julian Royce. Today's episode is perhaps one of my favorites that I've had on the podcast thus far. Today I'm speaking with Danny Balgooyen, if I am saying that correctly. And I say it was one of my favorites just because I love the flow of it, I love the places we went, and I love the sense of learning new things, even on topics that I know a decent amount about. For example, Danny teaches breathwork, and as someone, myself, I've studied forms of yoga and meditation for years now, maybe a decade and a half. The way that he teaches breathwork is a bit new to me, and I really appreciate his presentation and what he had to share about it. He's also someone who's been really involved in community and building community and in offering really cool events, and I appreciated his use of language. I believe he used the word permissionful, that he creates permissionful spaces. And I like that word. Rather than telling people what to do, creating a space of permission and invitation. And actually it reminds me, I was at one point in time working on a book called Permission Slips to Yourself. And I was in a relationship and we were working on this book together, and the relationship ended, the book never got written. But it was meant to be like the kind of book you might have in your bathroom when you sit in the toilet. You could read these permission slips to yourself. I have a couple announcements. One is I'm launching a new psychedelic integration group that meets online the first and third Tuesday of every month. For more information, visit astateofmindcounseling.org. And actually just earlier today we had the first group and I thought it went really well. Each group meeting I will be sharing on a different topic related to integration. And everyone will have a chance to share about their own experiences and what they're working on in their life. And my second announcement is I am going to Miami in about 10 days and I'm giving 2 talks on an event there called The Love Burn. The first talk is lessons I've learned from 95 plus episodes of A State of Mind. And I think this is the 96th episode, so maybe I have to change the title of that one. And the second talk, which I am actually a bit more excited about, is called Psychedelics, Psychotherapy, and the Nature of the Self. I will be presenting on some stuff that I've really been thinking a lot about and working on, and also that I'm using in my own work as a therapist and meditation teacher and coach and all of that. And I'm planning to have those recorded, so hopefully they will be on YouTube eventually. So, without further ado, I bring you Danny Balgooyen. Being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I was going to say your last name, but I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce it.
Yeah, Balgooyen. It's a different one.
Where is that from?
I'm told it's Dutch, and I had a Dutch manager once who told me it means to throw a ball.
To throw a ball.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. Which I guess looking and reflecting on my family, that makes sense.
Does it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, athletes and ball sports and things like that.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, you've been doing some cool events around here in Boulder. Like, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
It seems like you do a lot of different things.
Yeah, I do. In my eyes, they all complement each other, and it can all be expressed together. And in essence, it's really creating a permissionful space to express, to connect, and to meet and turn towards what's real for us. And the practice is really an attunement to what is arising throughout this process. So the expressions that this can come through in is I'll use cacao in ceremonial avenues. I will offer breathwork. I teach dance workshops. I DJ and create dance space similar to ecstatic dance, and authentic relating.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, many ways of just creatively bringing connection and invitations for people to explore themselves and each other.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that. Yeah, and they all sound different, but they all do go together. They make sense. I think the piece of authentic relating is a really cool one to kind of highlight and share, because so many of us, so many people that I see, myself included, we're like looking for more community. I think we live in a very individualistic culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think COVID has exacerbated this trend towards isolation or separation, and finding ways to come together, and finding ways to come together that maybe don't involve traditional religion, if that makes sense, because that's maybe something that in the past brought a lot of people together that's like shifting, I think, for so many of us today.
Yeah, the evolution of that need to belong.
Right.
Yeah, and I find that authentic relating can offer a really simple, I mean, to me, really simple, easeful structures that our society doesn't really offer in how we relate and how we connect. So I love to use authentic relating as a way to prime a group, to prime a space, to really build a foundation that a deeper experience can be supported by. So, once you express yourself and you're witness and you're seen, and you may see or witness someone else in the space, and there's so many ways to do it, which is really a fun piece of it for me. But when you have that level of connection, all of a sudden our nervous system can feel relaxed. We can feel more present to a space, to ourselves, and to a group. And that place creates safety for me in how I witness it in people. And when that context is offered in the beginning of an experience, or as I use it as more of a foundational piece to an experience, it offers potential for us to soften and to relax more into an experience. And when we approach experiences that way, especially more, present experiences, for me it offers more depth.
I love that. Yeah, I was going to name the safety piece, and you just said it, but that's a big one. And sometimes when I meet with someone one-on-one, like just taking a moment, pausing, like looking around the room, like, do you feel safe here? And acknowledging that and appreciating that, and like allowing that feeling to maybe grow a little bit, strengthen it. I think that's that's, to me, is foundational to going deeper. A sense of safety. But then you're also talking about permission, like you're creating a space of permission and,
Yeah, that's actually probably what's most alive in me lately, is really that invitation. It's not a, you need to be any way here. It's just see what it's like to show up and to lean into some of the invitations.
Yeah.
And from there, it's really also, I don't so much make it explicit verbally, but through the experiences, it's really an opportunity for us to empower ourselves to have more attunement to our yeses, our nos, our boundaries, and what's real for us, while also coming up to our edges and leaning into those. And I have a belief when we call it edge work, when we do that in a supportive way, not blowing by edges or not confining ourselves inside of our edges, but coming up to them and just slowly saying hello and seeing what it's like when we nudge those edges. And then I find that all of a sudden we start to create this capacity in ourselves to be with more things, which I think is, just part of being human.
Yeah. What would an example of an edge be? Like to make it a little more concrete for someone listening.
Yeah, totally. So an edge can be that feeling inside of resistance, of hesitation, of fear, of something more specific, how it can express, of maybe I'm inviting a question within authentic relating around the biggest fear in my life right now is. And for me to say that to you, that might be a little scary. That might be an edge of my comfort zone.
Right.
So when we slowly expand this edge of our comfort zone, all of a sudden what feels comfortable in our experience is there's more capacity there.
Yeah.
So that's how I see edge work.
It's well said. To go slowly, like what I'm hearing from you is like this sense of being grounded, moving slowly, being curious, exploring, Because what I've seen at times, and I've done this in the past too, is like you said, like you blow by an edge or you kind of jump out into the deep end, whatever that means in a given situation or experience, and you kind of bypass maybe yourself, and actually it's not, it could feel ungrounded or not sustainable, or there could be this big expansion and then a contraction. And I think to a large degree that expansion and contraction is a normal, natural thing that we can make conscious, like we do it when we breathe. There's times when maybe when I want to go out a lot, times when I want to be inward more, or more extroverted, more introverted. But if we try to blow past that and always be, going out, for example, whatever that means in a situation like that, I think it's dangerous, and I think it doesn't. It's what's the word? It's not integrated if you're pushing it too much.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's an attunement when there's force.
Maybe that's another way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, like maybe everyone else in the space is showing up to an experience in one way. So then I feel something in me that might be like, oh, I should be like this because this is what the space is calling for.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes create the reaction from that could be, a strong contraction that starts to make us more afraid of that edge and actually come more inside of our edge.
Yeah.
So there's not a right or wrong or with expansion and contraction. It just is.
Absolutely.
And it's how do we relate to it? I think that's part
of that.
Yeah.
And just to notice or admit like our cultural kind of biases towards extroversion over introversion, for example. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of it's wonderful to say, give the permission, like be however you are and explore that. But we're all carrying around, generally speaking, a lot of judgments about that. Like the should, like I should be this way, or I should be that way, or I shouldn't be this, or shouldn't do that. And I think to like have like a real, genuine community that where you can feel held and witnessed and seen, even when you're in a difficult spot, or even when you're in a contracted place.
Oh my gosh, some of the deepest medicine is when we lean in when we're contracted. It's easy, when we're feeling open and our heart feels, connected to things, and we feel, states of love and excitement. It's like it's really easy for me to go out and be with community in that place. But to lean in when it's actually maybe muckier or heavier or more of a dense experience. And that's when I feel like some of the deepest medicine of community can and support can really show up for us.
Yeah. I mean, so to me, you seem like someone who's like really in community, creating community, doing a lot of community events, and I think like living in community, right? Like living in a kind of community house of some kind. Like, do you want to speak to that? Like what your journey has been with that?
Yeah, beautiful. So I've been for the last probably 4 years living in cooperative style living situations where we have, 5, 6, 7 people living in a larger home and really working on creating an environment that is supportive to each individual and us as a collective. And I think that's when community really becomes powerful, is when we're attuned to what's going to serve us while also being attuned that there is a collective experience. And contributing to that and knowing that we're constantly having impact there. The community building that really inspires me is it's pretty playful. It's really just about coming together with a willingness to be real with ourselves and each other in whatever form that wants to express in, and see what happens when we deepen. And it's beautiful, it's chosen family to me. And there's something really, really soul nourishing for me, having that just be my world, to be my bubble of, I have these people that I get to be with, and that I choose to be with. And I think I named it just a little bit ago around that innate human desire and need to belong.
Yeah.
That is, to me, priceless. And when we feel supported and we feel like we're contributing to something or we're a part of something, that has me feeling relaxed. It has me feeling inspired. It has me feeling really grateful.
Yeah. There's so much from what you just shared, but I agree 100% about the need to belong, like that we have that, and I think that there is like a real collective wounding around that I've seen in myself. I've seen in people I work with, and I've seen it play out in a lot of communities, because I've seen a lot of community houses, or just communities, but like I've started some community houses that have kind of failed, quote unquote, because people get triggered, activated, acting out all these family dynamics or fear, paranoia. But I think that there's this collective wounding around the need to belong that I think, like I said, our culture is very individualistic, and so we tend to be focused on ourselves and like our needs and wants and desires and what we want our life to be. And I see some of that as playing into consumerism, right? Like money and consumer, whatever, buying objects, having a car, whatever it is kind of like, at least some of the time, like coming from this like need for belonging in this weird way. Like it's like, it gets like, we kind of tricked. And then we don't feel satisfied with the new shiny object or house or whatever it is. Because the other thing that's fascinating to think about is, if you are, like, basically the richer you become, the more isolated you tend to become. Because like imagine maybe like when you're in college, you live in a dorm room and there's a lot of people around, and then if you become a successful, like, rich person, you buy, bigger and bigger houses, bigger and bigger yacht or boat or whatever it is. So, eventually you're, like, isolated in, like, a cul-de-sac neighborhood behind, like, a locked gate, and you have all this money and you're in a giant home, but you're also kind of alone. Or maybe you have your immediate family there. But if you're just, I don't know. I think about it sometimes. Like, if you have a huge home and you have, like, 4 or 5 people and a family living in that, and there's, like, more rooms in the home than there are people there, then you're actually isolated within that house from each other, right?
Yeah, and this is actually something that I pay attention to quite a bit around, the last, maybe it's 100 years or so, around the shift into the, strong nuclear family situation, and this we need our own everything, and then comparing ourselves to whatever, the Smiths or the Johnsons or whatever down the street. And that just is inviting separation. It's inviting this this nuclear, we have us and that's it.
It's like a us versus them and a comparative mentality.
And it's like we didn't even realize we were handed these blueprints, especially in the Western culture, around like it comes from all the directions. It comes from schooling, it comes from media, it comes from consumerism, it comes from capitalism. They're all just influences. And so what I really like to bring is opportunities for us to allow these types of programs, these types of blueprints that we were handed, to welcome them to the surface in a really inclusive and safe space, and then to turn towards it and be willing to see it and to feel it. And from that place, all of a sudden, it's like, wow, this is something that is subtle under the surface that has been driving my experience my whole life, and I haven't even realized it. I've chose my job, I've chose my friends, I've chose my activities based on all of these things that I didn't even realize I was handed. And now, what do I do with that?
Right. Yeah. Handed, like, the ideas, expectations, like you said, blueprints, like the maps almost of... It's amazing to me how we live in a very free society, actually, a free country in a lot of ways. We have a lot of freedom. Like, no one's going to legally stop you from doing a lot of stuff, generally speaking. But it's kind of amazing to me how much the societal expectations weigh heavily on us, despite all that. And even though a lot of people don't actually care about that, but we still feel affected by it. Then if you actually talk to someone one-on-one or whatever, they're like, I don't really care about that, but yeah, you probably, I have that general idea that I'm supposed to get a job and get married and have kids and get my own house. And if you don't own your own house by this age, then you're like, kind of like, what's going on? Or all these ideas and expectations, they're kind of under the surface. And then, it's been coming up more in conversations and my work with people of like, God, I don't want that. I don't want to live by that. I want to be free of that and find out what's true for me.
Yeah, to me, this is really alive in the field right now around owning and claiming our power. And a lot of these programs are actually claiming, or we are offering a lot of our power to those things. So something that I feel really passionate about is allowing ourselves to realize and become aware of how we give away our power in all of the ways, whether it's to people or to things or anything. And then what does it mean to claim it back? And that can look like infinite things. But to me, it's really just about knowing we are, in essence, creating our experience, and that we are capable of starting to do it consciously. Because when the programs are running our experience, then it's an unconscious creation. It's and then we're just, in this place of, I wish it was different and I'm hoping for a different outcome, but I'm still doing the same things, wishing that something would change. And so these experiences that I create are really around it's like a somatic contemplation of like allowing what is here, like stored in the body, which is where I believe so much of our everything lives, like the body knows. So how can we enter into more embodied, attuned states of listening and then see and be with what arises without needing to fix it, to heal it, to get rid of it? When we approach these things in that way, I feel like we create our own block to it. But when we more just meet what is without that agenda that I need to fix something within me, it's actually allowing ourselves in. And this is really alive for me right now around this visual of our protections, like maybe a shield that at some point, an energetic shield that I created to protect some part of me. Maybe it was a tough breakup, maybe it was my parents getting divorced, maybe it was a bully, I don't know, whatever it was. At some point there was a vulnerable part of me that I needed to protect. And then I put on this shield to protect that piece. And now it served me then. But now, maybe I was 7 years old when this happened and I'm 31 now, but I'm still using the same shield that protected me when I was 7. And then these ways of listening and having structures that we can lean into to allow these protections or our edges to come to the surface, and then to be like, oh, whoa, that shield is so outdated for what it's protecting. But we can't know that unless we know what it is protecting. And so instead of this, I need to fix something, I need to become something, that's really kind of going out. It's almost like adding more layers over the protection. Where my philosophy is, can we soften to a point to where the protection becomes malleable and it allows us in to become aware of what it's protecting. And then when we start to form a relationship to that, then we have the ability to realize maybe an evolution of this protection is in store to serve me for where I am now. But the journey for me in this context is around what will soften us and allow us in to our most natural essence. Instead of going out into what do I want to become. It's more of discovering more of what I already am. And these protections are just the things that have been in the way for me having a more intimate relationship to that. And allowing others to as well.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
That was a lot.
I know, there's so many places I could ask you about, but you said, in essence, we're creating our own experience. And that's been kind of a stumbling block for me in terms of the language. Like, I like the phrase co-creating, even though it sounds a little clumsy. because whatever's happening, like, we're all creating this together. And I think that it's possible to, in some sense we're creating our own experience, but that could become a very kind of narrow, ego-centered, you get what I'm trying to say, right? Do you want to, how do you speak to that?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we have what we have power over, we have what we have more influence of. And then there is a universal experience that's happening that we are in co-creation with. And so it's not black and white, it's not this or that, but it's gray. It all molds together. So we have a collective creation that's going on, and this is the material expression of it. Then we also have those things on a more microcosmic level of what we are actually creating within ourselves and in our experience. So it is a co-creation. I love that reframe.
Yeah.
So that's part of the journey of like becoming aware of like, I have a really beautiful man in my life who says suffering is just resistance to what is. And so the more I resist those things that are out of my control,
right.
I can't decide what is happening in the collective. I am in co-creation with the collective, and I have impact on the collective. But in essence, I'm a speck of dust.
Yeah, that's the other side of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but as being a speck of dust, then there's infinite possibility. When we consciously realize that it's only our decision to make it as serious as it wants to be, as real as it wants to be.
Right.
And to me, when we can I look at things as paradoxes, when we can bring levity, when we can bring softness and gentleness to our experience, it actually empowers us so much more. Where the paradox there is, we were taught that I need to be strong and firm and direct, and as a man I need to be powerful, and this is what power looks like. And I actually, I see it as a paradox. So that discernment of like what, especially when we see patterns in life, it's like, wow, my last 3 relationships, I'm still learning the same lessons. And so like that must be that's my responsibility. There's something there that I can own.
Yeah.
But I can't own a collective's experience.
Yeah. It's a interesting thing to think about and try to dive into, but at least in the realm of relationships, like the person you're choosing to be in a relationship with, I mean, that's something you're choosing on some level. So yeah, I think for sure, like we're all creating this together. We have responsibility for our choices and what we're doing. And then like within ourselves, there's like multiple sub-personalities and parts. And maybe you're speaking to that with the defensiveness. So it's sometimes you're like, wow, why did I do that? I don't understand why I did that at all. But there's they're not always talking to each other, these different parts of ourselves.
Yeah. When you can create a seat at the table for all the parts and realize that you are at the head of the table. There is a higher self that can show up online. It's almost like a kindergarten teacher with all of its kindergarten students.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor.
So knowing that the teacher or our, I'm going to in this moment call it higher self, is in essence creating a container for these students to experience, to be seen, to be valued, to be heard. And if you're a teacher who neglects certain students, you're going to have a chaotic classroom. But if you create a seat at the table for all your students and you relate to them with love and with spaciousness and willing to listen, all of a sudden you can have a much more cohesive experience with all the students or all the parts who are part of your experience. And that's really, in essence, a huge piece of us creating our experience. Because these parts are very much the programs. And the repetition of these programs, to me, when I say we are creating our experience, if we're doing it unconsciously, those suppressed parts are impacting our experience in really large ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like we painted a rather complex picture for people, but I think it's good because it's maybe more true. You know?
Yeah. I can go down that rabbit hole for a long time. But yeah, there's I feeling called to share another big passion of mine, which is around the breath work.
Yeah, we were talking. That's great.
Yeah.
That's how I originally connected with you, actually.
Yeah. So it came into my life about 7-8 years ago, and gosh, breathwork to me, it's such an umbrella term. Like to say like, oh, I do breath work. It's like, yeah, we all do. If
you're human.
Yeah. So what falls under that is very vast. And where I get excited with breath work is I like to conceptualize it into two ways. One is more passive breath work or breath awareness. So that's just noticing and being aware of how my breath naturally is. Sitting here in conversation with you, whether I'm driving my car, really whenever a trigger of awareness of how's my breath right now is a really beautiful form of breath work.
Yeah. That's more passive to you. Well, to just highlight that for a moment, like, what is that process like? Like something like all this, you're just kind of having mindfulness and checking in from time to time. What is my breath like? And then are you just witnessing that, or are you taking that a moment to breathe deeper?
Beautiful. So my relationship to it is around, I call it the language of the breath. So I have a belief in a point of view that our breath is an expression of our current internal state when it's natural. So if I'm feeling anxious, or if I'm feeling a little fearful or uncomfortable, my breath is probably going to be more shallow. It's going to be more up into my chest.
Right.
And it's an expression of that current emotional state. If I'm feeling relaxed, if I'm feeling calm and grounded, my breath is probably going to find itself lower into my body. It's going to be a slower breath, a fuller breath. So I call it the language of the breath. And it's a way of how I check in with myself of what's alive right now. And not needing to shame that or judge that or anything. It's just awareness. And then this segues perfectly into conscious breathing, or the second piece of how I categorize breath work. And that is consciously altering the breath to then mirror a new internal state. So there's so many ways to do this, but if basically an emotional state or a current state of being creates a breath pattern, also a breath pattern can create a state of being. So if I keep breathing the anxious breath, it's going to continue to reaffirm and create more anxiousness in my experience. So if I'm aware of an anxious breath, the breath awareness came in and I'm checking in with myself, just being with my natural breath. And I allow this to be a very intuitive process around what is this breath, if it was speaking something to me as far as a current state, what would it be saying? So maybe I'm feeling a little nervous, a little anxious, maybe I'm about to publicly speak in front of maybe I have pressure on myself about something. And I'm like, okay, noted. So now how do I respond to that and engage in this conversation that the breath and the body are always having? And so one way I like to play in this realm is to create a breath that is a representation of what I want to feel. So if I realize that I'm feeling anxious, it's like, okay, what would a intuitive, creative breath in this moment be an expression of feeling relaxed, of feeling content, of feeling present? Okay, so what does a relaxed, content, present breath sound and feel like for me right now? And breathing this breath, the more I breathe this breath, I'm actually consciously altering my breath to invite a new internal state of being.
Yeah.
So that's, in essence, how I like to categorize it. And I would say, in the breath awareness world, I'm doing it all the time, but it's pretty simple. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but it's simple.
Mm-hmm.
Conscious breathing, there is so much vastness of what we can find in this realm.
It's a really cool way to look at it. I've never quite heard it put that way.
Mm-hmm.
I like what you're sharing. Yeah.
Cool.
It's cool. It's cool how like listening, I'm like, oh, it makes me, I'm like tuning in my breath, and like it's something anyone listening could start to tune into right now. Obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the quickest way to now for me is the breath. When we're aware of our breath, it's really hard to be thinking about the past or worrying or visioning the future.
Yeah.
When in a moment, if I choose to feel and let my breath be a guide into my body and be with it releasing from my body, all of a sudden, it's really hard to not be right here. You can, it's possible, but it is a really beautiful guide and invitation to the present.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then this world of conscious breathing is where I've spent a lot of time. I've been sharing these styles of breathing for 7 years as in facilitation and experience creation and working one-on-one with people. Uh-huh. And what first impacted me the most was some people know it as rebirthing. Some people know it as many other things. Transformational breathwork, shamanic breathwork, the list goes on and on of all the infinite names that people are calling these styles of breathwork.
So rebirthing is a type of breathwork? I'm not familiar with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so a man named Leonard Orr in the 70s.
Is this the process where you're like rebirthing yourself? Like
it can be a part of it.
Through,
yeah. There's a lot of creativity.
A birth canal and
that can be a piece of it for sure. I mean, I've definitely have had those experiences and trainings. And
so when I was in grad school for studying psychology, we were warned to not do that because apparently in the past some people were doing that kind of rebirthing process where you entered this like tunnel and you came out the other side to be reborn, and if I'm remembering right, like one or more people like suffocated to death at some point in that. So it's kind of
so
taboo.
This is funny because this exact experience, which I don't know anything about the specifics of it besides a younger girl died suffocating in a bunch of pillows and blankets.
It's tragic. Yeah.
This is not something that I create, but this is why no one calls it rebirthing anymore.
Okay, because of that, yeah.
Because when this happened, it went out that rebirthing breathwork kills people. Like if you type in rebirthing,
it's bad for the PR.
You type in rebirthing into Google or a search engine, it's like these are the things that you find.
Yeah.
And
I wonder. I'd like maybe after this conversation, I'll research this more because one of the kind of downsides of the world of psychotherapy is there's a lot of fear in the field, and so. I don't know, I haven't researched this, so I don't know, but I'm imagining maybe thousands of people did this back in the 70s or 80s and got a lot of benefit from it, and maybe one person died, which is terrible and should never happen, but then to give the whole thing a bad name, and like, you should never do this, and you'll lose your license if you say this word out loud. It's almost like that kind of, is that kind of energy in the field so much. And,
yeah, to me, I don't know if it's like the part of me that doesn't want to believe stronger power narratives. But my experience with this breathwork and watching thousands and thousands of people experience this breathwork, it is one of the most empowering processes I've ever experienced.
Yeah. Well, but just to clarify, the breathwork you're talking about is just working with your breath, not covering pillows on your face. Or...
No. Yeah. Okay. No. So we're not creating wombs. We're not replicating anything like this experience. Really, in essence, it is a breath pattern that's done for an extended period of time, which is a connected and circular breath. And through this breath, we're building the energetic current within the body by taking in a little bit more air than we're letting out over an extended period of time. And as we're cultivating this energetic current within the body, we are welcoming, and this is how I conceptualize it, we're welcoming suppressed experiences and emotions to be brought into that current. So I like to look at emotions as just energy in motion. And if at some point in our life, which we all have had, where it wasn't safe to feel a certain emotion in an experience, I give this analogy a lot, but it just really represents it for me, which is giving a speech when we were young and it not going very well, maybe feeling insecure and disappointed and judged, and we're in a classroom setting, and instead of feeling those emotions or that insecurity, we suppress it, we bottle it, we push it somewhere. We don't allow the emotion or the energy to be in motion. And the body naturally knows how to release these emotions, but the mind's relationship to it can actually suppress it and push it down. And so that suppressed emotion has now become a stagnant energy within the body, to where it finds somewhere to live. And then before long, we get so used to carrying around this suppressed emotion or suppressed energy that we just identify to it. And normally we identify to it by creating a story with it. So the story most of the time in this situation is, I'm a terrible public speaker, and here's all my justifications why.
Right.
And then, you know,
a negative belief about yourself that you're identified with.
But it's stemming from this suppressed emotion and experience more than it is someone told us this. We decided this. It came. It came from an experience that we didn't allow to be released from our being. So we started to our mind started to identify to it. So how this weaves into this breath experience is through this current that we're creating. We're building the energy, and as the current gets larger, it welcomes this suppressed energy or suppressed emotion into a current and welcomes it to the surface. But it's in a container, it's in a space where we are welcomed to lean into it, to be with it, and to feel it. So that piece is the most important piece to me, because without it, you know, if we're back publicly speaking and we start to have all of this energetic response in the body of maybe starting to get hot and feeling our blood in our body, maybe starting to sweat under our armpits, or, you know, we're having energetic physical responses. But once again, we're not in a safe container to acknowledge and lean towards and be with. Most of the time, it more is an environment that's encouraging us to suppress it even more. Right. Be like, God damn it, not now. I need to speak in front of this group of people. But instead, what is it like to be with those things that most of society's environments is not safe enough to welcome to the surface, and to lean in and to feel those? And then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I had this experience in this breath work around feeling insecurity, around feeling disappointment or shame. And in that, all of a sudden, we gave the body the keys to the experience. We allowed it to allow the energy and the emotion to be in motion, and the body gets to purge it. And a lot of times what happens in this energetic purge, the stories and the identification to it purges with it. So then all of a sudden, without even, maybe you know the story of it, but a lot of times we don't even know the story. And then I'm back publicly speaking down the road, and it's like, whoa, I didn't have all of those physical responses that I used to have. That's so cool. So yeah, that's just a fun way that I like to bring texture to it.
It's gonna make me, I like to use the word current, like consciously engaging the breath in that way without pausing between inhale and exhale, right? That's part of it. You're like building up an energy that somehow allows or creates the conditions for some of that stuff to move through. Like there's like an energetic component to it. You know, like gets, I don't quite know how to put it into words, but you get what I'm saying. Like like you somehow, when you work with your breath that way, it's like you've energized yourself. You're inviting a lot of energy into the system.
Well, like I was sharing, around our breath pattern creates new states of being or our current state of being can create a breath pattern.
Yeah.
This breath pattern is actually creating an experience of welcoming the things that activate our sympathetic nervous system. So it's, even though we can have very blissful, very pleasurable, very connected and euphoric experiences in this space, really any range of sensation and emotion is possible. And my whole approach is we're here to equally meet that while giving it as much space as it needs for as long as it needs. And realizing that we don't need to approach these things that arise in a place that this is wrong or that I'm wrong. It's actually quite the opposite. We're just remembering how right we are. It's just these experiences that our body has carried around has given us a justification of why we can create a story of why we're not absolutely incredible, perfect human beings at our core.
Yeah. Whew, yeah, I'm glad we're on this subject. It's such a rich topic. I mean, I feel really inspired with breathing, breathwork more recently. Like, it's just kind of come alive for me more, and I just become so aware of how incredibly powerful it is. And I mean, the kind of experience you're talking about is very similar, if not identical, to psychedelic experiences, honestly. I mean, like Stan Grof, developed this breathwork to help people have these experiences in healing without the use of a substance. And I'm kind of remembering, especially when I was in my early 20s, I went on a lot of Buddhist meditation retreats. And so I heard so many teachers talk so much about the breath and follow the breath, but it was almost entirely, if not entirely, the passive kind of witnessing the breath. And so I got kind of burnt out on that and tired of it. I'm like, yeah, the breath, yeah. And now I'm kind of rediscovering, oh my God, the breath is actually unbelievably powerful and just incredibly, I don't even know what the words are. It is literally, our energetic body connecting with matter, mind, spirit, however you want to think about it. It's, I think it's kind of I think one way to think about it is it's like this portal where the life force actually is becoming embodied in our material body. I don't know what words to put to it, but something like that. Inspiration, breath, spirit. There's one Buddhist saying that I really liked, which was, let me see if I can get this right. You don't know. There's a couple of them, but one of them was you don't know what will come next. Your next breath or your next life. As long as we're breathing, we're alive. And at some point in time, we'll breathe that last breath. And we will exhale, and our spirit, so to speak, our consciousness will exit this material form in some sense.
I got chills.
I mean, it's literally our life force, or the expression of it, at least.
Yeah, the Latin root of breath is spirit. And now, to me, this is just obvious. Yes, duh. But I realized that for so much of my life, this was not obvious.
Right.
And to start to build a really intimate relationship to this, it overflows into everything. It's the one thing that is just so necessary, and it's constantly a part of our experience. It's constantly impacting our experience, and there's so much that's possible under it. You're talking about Stan Grof. He used to do LSD studies, where when LSD went illegal in the 60s, he's like, I'm having incredible breakthroughs with this in therapeutic settings, but now I can't do it. So how can I still keep this work moving forward? And that's how he created holotropic breathwork.
Right.
So, yeah, if anyone is connected to holotropic breathwork, what I am most grooved in and love sharing is similar. I would say holotropic is a very masculine approach to this style of breathwork.
Is it a little faster?
It's a active inhale and an active exhale.
Okay.
It's very intense most of the time. Very intense music. And it's really meant to be a journey.
Yeah.
but to me, it's an approach of like, I need to break through. I need to get there. And what works for me, and there's not the way, there's just ways that work for us. And this is the way that works for me. Holotropic has worked for so many people in the world, and so thankful for that being here. And my relationship to this style of experience with the breath is to soften, and to not feel like I need to get somewhere or break through. It's more actually about how can I become even more receptive to myself and to my experience, and that expresses in the breath. So I find a more balanced approach in the breath where the inhale is active and the exhale is really receptive and allowing. So the inhale is what's cultivating this energetic current within the body, and the exhale is really our expression of loosening the grip of control and giving the keys to the body to be like, yes, you carry so much innate wisdom, and I'm now wanting to give you that opportunity.
It's beautiful.
To tap into that.
So to make sure I'm getting this right, the inhale is a little more active and the exhale is more release. Is that kind of how you maybe talk about it? Okay.
Yeah, so the inhale is what's creating the energetic experience, and the exhale is what's softening us into what's arising, to what's here, and to what's alive.
Yeah.
And that softening process is what really works for me to allow me in. And that's where I feel like, where our truest remembering lies. And that's what I feel like life is so much about. We're constantly here to remember and to, for me, orchestrate life, to have the people and the circumstances and the practices that remind me of these remembrances. And I really tap into that through more of this expression of this one area of breathwork.
Yeah, that's great. Have you done much with Wim Hof breathing? Because that's become so popular.
Yeah, I have a very intimate relationship. Something I do more regularly. So Wim Hof took inspiration of his method from Tumo breathing, which is an old Buddhist style of breathing.
Tibetan Buddhist,
Tibetan Buddhist style of breathing that he westernized and made really approachable, and then added the cold therapy with it. His story is amazing. He's an incredible human being. Wow, what a power.
I love his voice.
Yeah, he is such genuine, authentic power to me, and I really appreciate that about him. And I have my own version, my own expression of how I bring Tumo breathwork, Wim Hof, and there's actually another, a guy, Niraj, from, he's been living on Koh Phangan in Thailand, created a breathwork called Soma breathwork. And then there's an essence that he worked with Wim Hof for a long time and took a lot of inspiration from it, but also has created his own body of work around it and his own process and method. And I kind of weave all three of those, Tumo breathwork, Soma, and Wim Hof into my morning breathwork. And then I do these deeper journeys. So my morning breathwork is maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes at most. And then this deeper breathwork, it's an hour and 15 minutes of an experience. So it's much more of a commitment. And I do that. My rhythm with that is about once every 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Did you learn about Tumo from a Buddhist teacher, or?
I learned about Tumo through Wim Hof, because I was first exposed to Wim Hof. And then just being a curious being in the breathwork world, I just kind of pulled the threads, and it brought me to Tumo breathwork.
That's so cool to hear about. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole a lot, but something I've been thinking about is in the world of Tibetan Buddhism, Tumo is a very advanced practice that you have to do a lot of prerequisites, a lot of other practices to build up to, initiations, empowerments, retreats. And there's all these warnings around doing practices like that with the energetic subtle body with breathing, that if you do it incorrectly, you could go insane or you could hurt yourself. And I heard someone talking about this the other day who's a Buddhist scholar, and he's like, well, look at like what Wim Hof is doing. He's like, maybe some of this traditional warnings aren't actually that what's the word? They're not that accurate, because like maybe people are more resilient and can know their own body, and maybe it's not as dangerous as some of the tradition. I don't know, but I'm starting to think that's true, because obviously like millions of people are doing the Wim Hof breathing, and we're not seeing millions of people going to the ICU or going to the psych ward. And so I think we can trust ourselves more. Like we have the power in ourselves.
Yeah, what's arising hearing this, to me, it's like so many powerful practices were kept secret for so long.
Yeah.
And there was a we need to protect this kind of energy.
Yeah.
And then in the stars, if you think of the Aquarian age arising, that is that which what once was a secret is now becoming known. So I feel like right now we're in this journey of having access to the information. The challenge is there's so much information that it becomes overwhelming, and we don't end up doing anything with the incredible access that we have to powerful things.
So overwhelming. Yeah, we're in the age of information for sure. And I mean, I say that with all due respect to the tradition that I've been a part of these traditions for a long time, but I think you're right. I think we're in the age of information. What was once secret or reserved for a few people that they would literally hear by word of mouth, you can now read about on the internet. And so it's like we're just in a different world, but it's not a bad thing if it's helping people. I mean, that's the point of all these practices, is to help people. So.
Yeah, I think Wim Hof is done an incredible job at bringing people into an exposure and an entry point into a more intimate relationship with their breath and their body and all of the things. But just so Wim Hof would fall under conscious breathing, right? We're altering the breath to create a certain state of being. In my view, in Wim's practice, is really it's also a form of edge work. We are consciously creating a stress response in the body and then using the power of the mind to calm ourselves and relax ourselves in that state where our body wants to get the fuck out. Whether we're in ice cold water or whether we're doing a breath hold where the body's like, I need to breathe. And you're like, you will, just not yet. Just not yet. And then we keep expanding that stressor's capacity. And the more we play around, and that's something I feel like is just in our modern culture, we've become very soft. So this is a way of like intentionally creating stress on and in the body and telling our nervous system that it can relax in a state of stress. And when it does, all of a sudden the capacity to handle stress expands. So then now I have more emotional capacity in my relationships. I have more physical capacity in my body. These ways that it can be subtle and seem slow, but over time it's like, wow, these things are changing me.
I can agree more. I think what you just said is really important. Building our resiliency, our strength, our capacity to be with stress. I've been doing the Wim Hof breathing in the morning recently, and definitely coming up against this fear of, I guess, suffocation or not breathing. Like I have maybe more than, I guess everyone has that fear to some degree, but for me it's like pretty strong. Like if I was going to name like a top fear, it would be up there. Like the fear of not being able to breathe. And so I've met that edge, and some mornings, sometimes when I'm doing it, I can meet that edge and be with it and not breathe. And sometimes it's just like, I have to breathe. And to be okay with myself. Like, okay, that's what needed. That's what, that's okay.
My projection of that would be that there was at some point an experience in your life that you had to, you had a scare, you had an experience of, maybe it was in the womb, maybe it was coming through birth, maybe it was as a young child, but something around the breath, maybe it was a past life. You never quite know, but like building a relationship to those things, leaning into those fears and having these types of outlets to build relationships to it, that is, to me, in essence, over time going to bring more power to us and our experience. And it's not linear, it's not just like you start doing these things, and like life is here and then it just goes in a straight line that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's a roller coaster. All this, that's just being human. But I have found that these are the things that have shifted me as a human being in ways that I am infinitely grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hope people listening are inspired to try this out, because it's so powerful. And,
Yeah, and it can look so many ways, you know, and just trusting the intuition of where it wants to bring you. Because like I said, there's not the way or a way. There's someone gave an analogy of like the journey is like being at the bottom of a mountain, and there's many trails, and they can go many different ways, but the farther you go, the closer and closer all the paths get. And that's really it. It's like, where does a trail start for you? Or if you're wanting to start, or if you're on a trail, like, is this the trail for me? Or am I like, this is scary, this is too steep, this is not my path. Or this is too boring, this is not my path, you know? And just being willing, one, to stay committed to things, because, you know, our avoidant natures, we're really good at stopping things. So there's a devotional element, but how we get to what we devote to, I think, is really important. And that only having an attunement to our intuitive sense can really be supportive to that journey for me.
Makes me think about it's like so much about self-honesty, like being really honest with yourself, because no one outside of you can tell you like go this way or go that way, or you know, like when you get to that edge, like, is this a moment to stay with it, to push harder, or to relax and let go and release? And no one can really answer that for you. I think you have to just be with yourself, be with your process, and be honest with yourself.
If we're leading our life based on what someone else is telling us, I feel like it's going to be very limiting. I've done that. I'm sure many of us have done that in our own expressions. And that's just part of the journey of owning our power and trusting ourselves enough to know that even if we don't consciously know and have the clarity now, can we have the trust and faith that it's here. It's always been here. It's just, what is my path into building a relationship to the clarity that we all have? It's within all of us. It's just a lot of us, we can start to feel really far from it. And just the distractions and all the things that can keep us preoccupied from that attunement. And that attunement is really where, like what you're sharing in your Wim Hof practice, you're having an attunement to what's going on, that, whoa, this fear of suffocation is coming up in me.
It's fascinating, because sometimes when I've done it, I'm like, that doesn't come up. And I can hold my breath for longer than, you know, I'm listening to like a little guided thing. I'm like, I'll pause it and I'm just there, and like everything, I'm just totally chill. I don't know how long goes by. And then other times it's like, oh my God, I've you know, that fear of death, that fear of, and it's connected with the fear of claustrophobia for me. It's like that's similar, it's related somehow. And so anyway.
The death fear is a big driver of our experience. I feel like the intimacy in the relationship that we can form with death can actually allow for so much more life. But that the stronger we're terrified and run away and hide from death, I feel like the less will we live.
That's another of your paradoxes.
Oh God, if I were to write a book, there'd be two books. One would be The Language of the Breath, and the second book would just be Paradox.
Nice. Sounds like a plan.
I'm sure there'll be a time where it's going to come through.
Well, I'm curious what feels alive for you now. I mean, another thing I was going to ask you about was like men's work. You've done some men's groups, right? If you want to speak to that.
I love men's work. One of the biggest impacts and pillars in my life. I have the privilege to be a part of one of the most powerful group of 10 men that we're probably 2.5, almost 3 years in together.
Wow.
We meet every Tuesday for 2.5 hours, and we have structure, but we also we have a different leader every week, and we fully empower that leader to curate, either fully lean on our structure or to get creative.
Is it the same group for the whole time?
There's been a few alterations throughout, people's lives, and some transitions, but definitely a majority of it has been solid.
So cool to hear.
Same group. Yeah, and then really, in essence, it's really beautiful. I feel this double healing that can happen in men's work, where at least for me, I was handed a program that there's competition here, and that my vulnerability or my weaknesses is a threat to my ability to be competitive in the competitiveness. And so normally throughout my life, I would rely on the feminine for more of my, my sensitive parts, my vulnerable pieces, or my insecurity or whatever, because it was a safer, softer place. And doing this kind of work with men, it's repatterning the competitive nature of that we're a threat to each other, or that we're for some reason not in incredible support to each other. And doing this level of meeting people, of meeting men in this kind of way, that is, it's just repatterning and reprogramming, I feel like, a lot of the toxic masculinity that we were brought into. And when you start to realize, especially like in this specific group I'm talking about, there's very powerful men doing very amazing things in the world, and they're having a human experience, and they have their challenges, they have their insecurities, they have all the things, and you're like, oh my God, it's not just me. And
that's such a big value out of a lot of group work that I've been a part of. Like, oh my God, I'm not alone here.
Yeah. And that safe space of, to me, when you have a group of people who intimately know your parts, they know your avoidances, they know your controller, they know all of these aspects of what normally are blind spots to us. And then when you're being supported by these people who, for years you have these reference points of relationship, of knowing each other in ways that, almost no one else in the world knows you to that degree. And being supported, to being loved, being shown up for in that way, it's huge for me. It's a huge pillar in my life. And I actually did my first led my first men's retreat this this summer. I did a 3-day, and I've done a lot of retreats over the years, and I love retreat space because once you enter into a depth with a group and you have many days with each other, that depth becomes the surface, and that creates an opportunity for just even more and more depth. So to have this retreat experience with all men, it was mind-blowing to me. It was so inspiring that, like, wow, this is so important right now. It's like coming back together. It's like we lost our way in so many ways, in the simplicity of gathering, of circling, of supporting, dancing, playing music. These kinds of things are like, gosh, they're in our DNA for centuries. Such a part of us. So it's really it's undoing and going back to certain ways in a I guess I'll call it a modern way.
Yeah, definitely. Like in the past, like, I don't know, it just makes me think about how for so much of our human history or evolutionary history, maybe before humans even we didn't have a lot of choice around the people we were with. You would be born into a tribe or a village, or maybe tribe is the better word, a group of hunter-gatherer people according to modern evolutionary science, we had maybe the modern Homo sapiens appeared like 100,000 years ago, maybe longer. And so for 90,000 years, we were in these hunter-gatherer tribes. And then after that, like maybe another, I don't know how many thousands of years, we were in tiny little villages, the vast majority of people. And so whoever you were with, you had to figure that shit out. And of course, a lot of times they probably didn't figure it out and they would fight, maybe they would kill each other sometimes. But there's something in that I think we're missing today, where it's good that we have choice and we can travel and move around, and you can move to a new city and make a whole bunch of new friends tomorrow. Okay, great. But the depth that you're talking about comes from staying connected in hardship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this piece. There's something that I feel connected to in hearing this. It's kind of a little sidetracked, but also in the same thread. Around, I've been doing events and offerings with groups for 7 years. And I realized that all through my 20s in doing this, it was like I would get momentum. I'd start to, have some depth and commitment with groups of people and building followings and community. And then I'd be like, okay, now I'm going to go to Indonesia for 4 months, or now I'm going to go to Southeast Asia for an extended period of time. And then I come back and then it's like, oh, I'm starting over again. And it hit me in the last year that I was about to play out the same pattern. I was going to go to Bali and for an open-ended period of time. And luckily at the time, Bali shut down. They weren't letting people in.
Oh, wow.
And then I just I don't remember exactly what was happening, but I had this realization that whoa, this is a pattern that I do. And I have momentum with my events. I have momentum with the people who keep showing up to these experiences and deepening with each other. Mm-hmm. And do I really want to just go off and just let that fizzle out? And at that moment I made a conscious decision of actually, what is it like if I just keep staying with this and I keep offering?
Yeah.
And I had an immediate universal response of confirmation, and I have chills just sharing this of yes, you're listening, you're adapting, and now you're going to get a different experience because of it.
Wow.
And so that commitment to staying with, and even when there's a part of me that's I'm ready to explore. So that sticking with and staying in, but the thing that really got me there is I have so much conviction in what I'm doing. I have such clarity of this is exactly what I want to do, and I'm so alive and I'm so inspired and passionate to do it. That that gives me the courage and the willingness to stay with it. Where prior I think I always had some form of a hesitation of is this really me? And that's that's a huge rabbit hole in itself of that journey of uncovering what all the outside influences that would impact how I would show up in the world. And
you got clear about what it is you want to be doing. Committed to that.
Yeah, and that's a journey. At least it was for me.
Imagine a lot of people listening can relate. I can relate. Can relate to what you're sharing. We have so many choices and options, and that commitment. And you want to be careful with that, right? You don't want to commit to something that's not actually the thing for you. So it's situational all the time, and at least in my circumstance and situation, it took me unmeshing from really, really supportive and loving people in my life that there was also a shadow to. And that was my nice guy, to be honest. Oh, wow. It was those that I would create with. I'm very much in my intimate relationships. I would listen to someone and to what they want, and didn't even realize that I had this way of listening to them while simultaneously convincing myself that that's what I want too. And
So I gave my power away a lot in my creations. And these last 2 years has been an amazing journey of me separating from that and then realizing that, whoa, this is a huge way that I give away my power and my expression. And when I started to claim that and own that, all of a sudden, how and what and why and where all of a sudden became really clear. But it took that ownership of my experience and of what I want and what I desire, instead of wanting to please someone based on what they're asking of me and just my yes man, my conflict deflector, or wanting harmony in my experience. And the shadow of that was some submissiveness where I wouldn't filter what I'm receiving through what's real for me. So that's a forever practice for me of attunement.
Yeah, and that process of filtering, what's true for you, does that look like sometimes like you're taking some more time and space, like for yourself to like be with yourself, or are you able to just kind of do that in the moment? Because I think that's where I feel a little what's the word, sticky or stuck sometimes. Like I've realized that for myself, and I don't know if saying this helps other people who are listening, but I'm actually kind of a slow processor, and I actually need to take time and space before I make a decision. And it's frustrating. I don't like that about myself a lot of time, but it's just kind of something I'm learning to accept. And when I accept that, it works out better for me. Like there's a decision, I was like, okay. I actually had someone do this thing called, you probably know more about than I do, but human design. And they were like, they told me that. And when they said that to me, I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking about that, and that's true for me. But it takes me a little while. And when I get pressured to make a quick decision, then I can get into trouble. And that can actually be really manipulative if someone's pressuring you to decide something quick, It can be a manipulative thing or a power play or whatever, but
yeah. Like I had named before, we're all so unique and it's so situational. You want to talk about Vedic astrology or human design or the gene keys or any of these ways of like understanding our constitutional essence.
Yeah.
Which I don't want it. I feel like they're supportive constructs when we can relate to them in that way instead of a limiting construct. Like I do believe that probably is a part of your constitution around you take more time to process things, to find your clarity.
Right.
But I would never want that to limit you, that you can't know something in a moment.
Sometimes I do. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right. But that awareness can give you permission in a moment of I don't know what's true for me in this moment. So I know myself enough that I can orchestrate an experience to help bring that knowing within me. And what that looks like right now is I need some space.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
So that
hold the possibility of that, and sometimes I might not need that.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah. So for me personally, it's like, so my system moves really slow. And that's one thing I love about the breathwork, is the breathwork allowed me into my emotions. And because my emotional body moves slower, I can't just like immediately be like, boom, here's all the emotions. It's like it's layers. And I have a certain process of going through that. But as far as that discernment of where truth is for me, it's always unique, but what I'm practicing in the most is what is my body's reaction in a moment. Like, is there some form of contraction? Is there some form of denseness or heaviness or lightness, expansion? One great thing I have with my creations is like, after I do an event, do I need to recharge? Do I feel drained? Or do I feel like I have a lot of energy and I'm inspired and I just want to like connect and be in my expression?
Yeah.
So it's like when something's draining me, it's a clear sign that there's an energetic leak or a puncture in my field. And normally for me, that's me giving away my power, or me not allowing my truth to be valued or acknowledged in myself. When I'm my energy is contained and I'm not drained by what I'm doing, it's life-giving. When my work is life-giving, then I know that there's alignment. I know I'm coming from my truth. So that's my process of discernment, and also in reflection. Like I did an event last night, and I'm so turned on by it that I'm like, I can't even fall asleep right now. I'm getting up early to go to the gym, like I'm gonna go to sleep, and then I laid there for an hour, like, oh my gosh, I'm just like alive right now, because this experience just elevated me so much. So that is a really great way of me reflecting on, okay, where did I come from in this circumstance? And then more live in the moment, it's like when someone's asking something of me, what is my body's response in that moment? Is it like I'm pulled in and I'm like lifting up to the idea of this, or am I kind of maybe contracting and feeling myself kind of, and it's like the body's constantly communicating. I also do muscle testing. It's a fun little practice as well.
Cool. No, that's helpful. Yeah, listening to the body. I mean, it's kind of like ways to access our intuition, right? And trust ourselves.
It's a practice. It's a muscle, it's working and building a relationship to that intuitive sense that we all have. We literally some of us are more natural to it than others, but we are all, I believe, all have an intuitive ability, but it's just whether we practice it or not.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because when you say practice it, it's like something we can all do. We can all start trying. We can all, rather than some people have it, some people don't. Yeah. I think that's a big one for a lot of people that I've talked to, and myself, like, to trust yourself, to trust your intuition, to find some deeper way of knowing to operate in the world. Like, that's kind of what I've been paying attention to more myself.
Yeah, and I love when practice this is something that's like really alive for me right now, which is, people in this world, and I imagine people who would be listening to this have, more of a connection to mindful practices, to more conscious ways of living, and in these, we'll call them communities, in these circles, in these environments, sometimes things can get really serious. And it's like the work should be the work. It should be hard. It should be a grind. And that's all a projection and a story. And for me, what I'm loving is like, what if there's a perspective shift that the work could be really fun, or the practices could be really fun? What if my journey of strengthening my intuition was like the funnest thing I've ever done? Instead of like, I need to practice my intuition, and I should be, and I'm not, and that's why I'm not intuitive. It's like it's just a denser feeling for me. But when it's like, what if me getting to know myself? What if me getting to empower myself to do my shadow work from a place of that it could be really fun, or that it could be light and playful. Not that it needs to be or it should be, but just that it can be. Because it's not always going to be, of course, if we're diving into the deepest parts of our shadow or aspects of ourselves, like it can look like a lot of things. But that's why I love dance, because it's like, it's such an expression of welcoming it all. And like, sometimes it can look so different, but just opening up to the possibility that like my evolutionary journey can be awesome.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I think being in the mindset of like, it's got to be hard or difficult, or there's a cost to that after a while. And I experienced that in my experience with Buddhism, I think, if I'm being honest, where it's like, yeah, sometimes it's fucking hard, and there was value in that, but like, there's also value in finding your natural truth, finding what feels natural, easeful. I don't know. I think is a big conversation, but religion, spirituality, where we're trying to follow these great teachers or examples from the past or maybe today, and that was like their path, you know. It's like, what is your path? It's like for some people apparently are able to sit still and abiding in their essence nature for hours on end. That's awesome. Like, that's great. So it's worth putting effort to try to get there, but their experience of that isn't necessarily that it's hard or difficult or effortful. It's actually easeful and blissful, and they've discovered their truth, and they're just abiding in that and content there. And so it's one of these paradoxes. I guess you go back to your book at the paradoxes. But I don't know. It's not a one size fits all world, obviously, and maybe we need more permission to just be out, follow our that thread of aliveness in ourselves.
Yes, that last thing you just said, my full body confirmed. Nice. Yes. It's like that is in essence what I'm inspired to do, is create permissionful space for us to follow the energy of our aliveness and see where it takes us.
Yeah.
And it's not, I used to teach a lot. I used to share a lot, and I still love to share, and I still love to speak. But to me, I'm having this visual of like allowing an experience to be the teachings that we are invited into, and consciously empowering ourselves to choose and to say yes to. And then whether it's through dancing or it's through connecting or through breathwork, whatever it is, what if it's that the teaching lands from the ground up into our body, and by the time it gets to our mind, like our body already knows it. And our mind's like, oh, well, duh, like I get it. And my body's like, yeah, thanks for catching up, like we're already here. Instead of, the contemplation, which contemplation is beautiful. I mean, I love the Gene Keys. It's all about contemplation. But the receiving from the top down, where the bottleneck can happen, like so we can understand things, like we can understand that we're co-creating our experience. We can understand that our empowerment is where our gifts can lie and can express and can come alive. There's things that we can conceptually understand, but it doesn't mean it's integrated in the body.
Right.
So I'm really interested and inspired by how can we create experiences that the teaching is just happening through people saying yes to the invitations of a space. And it's so subtle that you don't even realize it's happening. You don't even realize that all of this work is happening inside of you until it's already done, and then the mind catches up to it and it's like, whoa, holy shit, I'm looking at myself totally differently. I'm relating to myself totally differently from a somatic level, from a subconscious level, not from this like, consciously this is how I want to be. This is what I consciously choose, which is beautiful, but the subconscious is really ruling our experience in my eyes.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the time, at least, yeah.
Yeah, fun. Is there any other curiosities you got for me, or yes, anything else that I can that you feel inspired to dig into?
Yeah, I realize we've been talking for a while, but I don't know. I mean, the other thing I was going to ask you about is just how you kind of got to be where you're at. Like, what? I'm imagining there was some inspiration to go on this path of whatever you want to call it, growth, awakening, insight, self-exploration.
Yeah. Fun stories. So I started, which is actually really interesting. My first mindful practice was competitive golf. Which not many people in my life now really know, but it's like something I put more time into than maybe anything else in my life. For 10 years, I about practiced or played every day.
What age was that?
I mean, I started with, maybe when I could walk, and I played through college. I'd say from like 12 or 13 to 23 was really committed. And were you
going in tournaments and stuff?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Played competitively. Played through high school. I had a full scholarship in college.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that. You can make a lot of money doing that, right?
A few people.
One of those things.
The people who really do nowadays, but there's a lot of people who are definitely on the grind.
Yeah.
But for me, that was where I got to meet myself, in playing competitively, and, whether it's putting pressure on myself, whether it's reacting to highs and lows, like in one round, it's like you lived a life. It's like you had to overcome things, you had challenges, you had rewards, you had all of these things that would happen, and you're constantly reacting to it. Yeah. So for me, it was a space to really see how I react to circumstances and to things that are happening in my experience.
Do you still play golf?
Yeah, I mean, maybe 3 times a month, 3 or 4, but it feels like a past life compared to how much I used to play. I still got it, like I can still play for sure, but it is a past life in a way.
Interesting.
And at 19, it's funny, my mom actually told me, she's like, I know this guy who he's a successful golfer and he practices yoga. And it was like, literally at that point, I'd maybe heard the word yoga like 10 times in my life. Oh, wow. And it was like, okay, you're like, 60 to 80 and you're female and you do yoga. Like that was the conceptualization that, a teenager looking at yoga when I was. And then she says he guarantees that it betters your golf game. Okay. And I was like, oh, okay, well, interesting.
Where did you grow up?
West Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And I was my freshman year of college, and I did a yoga it was like an elective or something.
Did it help your golf game?
It did. Cool. Very much. I mean, you think of core strength, flexibility, awareness of breath, all things very important in golf. Right. So yes, it did. But by the time I graduated college, I remember walking off my last hole being like, well, I guess that was it. Like the last 10 years of devotion, and then it just now comes to a complete halt because I was burnt out. I didn't want to keep going. Yeah. So I was ready to transition from it, and then it was golf was so important and yoga complemented it for me. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, this is becoming so not a big part of my life. It just really brought yoga into more importance into my experience. That led me to traveling to certain places, which led me to the breathwork, which the thing that blew my mind about the breathwork was my sister, who I first started sharing this breathwork with and doing all events and retreats with, and we're very powerful together. And she struggled with chronic migraines from 6 until 28, until this breathwork came in. And then after 5 sessions of this breathwork, I saw her for the first day of my life without a migraine. Wow. And it was like, whoa, I've seen you spend your entire life, in this realm of having a migraine. And this breath work is what gave it got rid of your migraine. Like, wow, that blows my mind. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, well, I'll start exploring this. Like, that sounds really interesting. What I was really loved, what I came to realize was that, just like psychedelic therapy or any type of therapy or type of things that normally we'd look at, that something needs to be wrong in order to do this. Right. I didn't have chronic pain. I didn't have something that's I have this thing and this is what's limiting me. I actually wasn't aware of what was really limiting me until I started to discover more of it through the breathwork journey. And I realized that through my golf career, I learned to be in control of my emotions. I learned to not let them take over me so I could still execute. But in that, there was a suppression that needed to happen in order for me to be in control of my emotions. And that suppression, I didn't realize how much impacted me.
Wow.
And how distant I felt from feeling my deeper emotions. And the breathwork was really that first deep avenue that allowed me in, and not only allowed me in to acknowledge them and see them, but to really feel them. And I live by a philosophy that we feel it to heal it. And that was just the perfect timing and the perfect place for me to realize, or to have a circumstance where I was invited into really feeling my emotions. And from that, so much happens, so much comes up. I realized that I use substances, especially cannabis, as a way of, not being annoyed by things. I smoked all through school, before school, at lunch. It was like, it's a thing that made me more content. If I was at school and I wasn't high, it was like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, this is dumb. Really? This is what we're doing?
Yeah.
And then if I smoked weed...
It made you feel okay with...
It made me like, okay, like, it's dumb that we're here, but I'm like so much more okay being here because of this.
Yeah.
Because I'm stoned. So being able to see these patterns of how I would avoid or cope or just like it to some degree it did support me, but then at some point it really limited me. It became a crutch more than it became a support. And that's someone said a really cool analogy of like a grooved too much can become a rut. And that's what it was for me. It became a rut more than it was a groove. And so when the breath work really came in, it just started to reveal so much of my patterning and how I unconsciously am creating a lot of my experience. And oh gosh, there's like, it would need to be a whole nother episode around the really deep, juicy aspects of this journey for me, of where I find myself where I am now. But that's at least an insight into the early aspects of this journey. And then just letting myself continue to attune and build a relationship to my intuition, and that keeps bringing me to things that are aligned and feel like they bring me alive and give me purpose and passion.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think breathwork could potentially be so helpful for so many people, but also people who have a relationship with cannabis, like you're talking about, or drinking, or whatever it is, because we're breathing all the time. I mean, it's a way to work with yourself where you can experience altered states, you can experience yourself in a whole new way, energies, insights, even visions, or like imagery, can appear, but without a substance, or without, all the potentially negative side effects from that. So
it's not what you do, but how you do it.
Right.
And if there's allies out there, and some of them are substances, in my eyes, but it's how you do it. Are you trying to go out or check out, or are you trying to tune in? And when
it's a relationship, that's how I talk about it. What is your relationship like, and what is it like to, I don't know, for me, I'm like, I like to, it's like take a pause for a while, and whatever it is, the behavior or substance or whatever, and like try to have a sense of your baseline without that thing. As difficult and challenging as that can be, it's a good thing to return to, I think, because then you know yourself on a deeper level, and you kind of clears the slate, right?
And that's what is beautiful about breathwork, which I find is a very empowering process, is, if I had a medicine experience that, like, maybe it's with ayahuasca or mushrooms or bufo, like it's almost like this substance or this medicine is showing me these parts of myself in the universe, where I call it a push-started experience. Where breathwork is a self-started experience. It's one that's like, It's not that something outside of me that I brought inside of me was showing me these things. It's literally my breath is showing me these things about myself. And there's something that's really integratable and really lands for me in that space. Not to say like I've had life-changing ceremonial experiences that I'm like so honored and humbled by. But I mean, if it was just that and not the breath work for me, I something would be missing.
Yeah. Makes me think of integration.
Yeah. Which, if it's not integrated, then we're bound to probably need to do it again.
Yeah. Another big topic. But it's been great having you on the podcast. This is a really good conversation. Went a lot of places, and
Yeah, we bounced, but I feel like it all complements each other really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. It's a super treat.
Thank you. Thanks, man, so much for listening. If you found value in this podcast, there are many ways you can support it, and one of the easiest and best is to just share it with friends, family, and post about it on your own social media accounts. That really helps the podcast a lot. You can leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts and now on Spotify Podcasts. And of course, you can join our Patreon community, patreon.com/astateofmind, where you will receive access to guided meditations from me, additional music and artwork, other goodies that are in the works. So check that out and learn more about my work as a therapist and meditation teacher at astateofmindcounseling.org. Thank you so much, and I will see you here next time.